Welcome to the Gavel. I am Terry Ikumi. An eventful week it was for lawmakers at the National Assembly. We'll try to squeeze all that into the next 25 minutes, beginning with how federal lawmakers reacted to gender abuse that trailed the past weeks, where girls were raped and murdered across the country. 14-year-old Tina Ezekwe fell from the bullet of a policeman in Lagos, Uwa Omozua, raped and killed by yet-to-be-identified persons in Benin City, Edo State. Two young girls killed within days of each other, tragedies which have become one too many in the country.
A 16-year-old girl.
Federal lawmakers in the upper chamber are concerned that cases of brutality and rape of girls are on the rise in the country, and they want stiffer penalties for rapists and sexual offenders.
Further aware that the girl child has become clearly endangered in Nigeria. Worried that our young girls may no longer have the confidence to live their normal lives, the average young girl in Nigeria is obviously becoming terrified and scared to live with and trust her close male relatives and neighbors.
If the authorities do not take serious action against rape, it will become a big scourge that will injure us down the line.
A 3-year-old baby was raped by a 44-year-old man. Mr. President, we have this everywhere in this country. Time has come when we need to change our criminal code and put a stringent punishment for rape in Nigeria.
The Penal Code prescribes a maximum of life imprisonment for rape. The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act provides a minimum of 12 years and a maximum of life for the same offenses, while the Child Rights Act may be considered as prescribing the stiffest punishment, life imprisonment. But a number of states in Nigeria are yet to domesticate the Child Rights Act and the VAP Act, and some states who have done so have also reduced the jail term to 10 years. Meanwhile, 48 hours after the Senate's reaction, the matter was raised in the House of Representatives, specifically of the rape and murder of 22-year-old Uwaila Omozua. The 22-year-old was gruesomely raped and murdered in a church in Benin City, Edo State, where she had gone to study.
The House is concerned that a better government policy and legislative framework is required to stem the rising violence against women, as well as improve and support for women development. Further concerned that Nigeria lacks a strong national response to support victims and survivors of violence against women and girls. The House is determined to ensuring safety, equality, inclusion, and protection of the rights of women and girls in Nigeria.
They raped a girl, killed that lady, and when they went to report to police, they were asking them to give them mobilization money, for God's sake, so that they would go and start looking for the killers. A girl was 19-year-old girl was raped and killed. We have not seen any strong statement from the IG of police to say that enough is enough. So I'm standing on this floor of the House to say that we are pained that our women are being raped. It's not even about girls. These people rape 70-year-old person. 80-year-old person is not even excluded. They can rape two-month-old baby, and they are not prosecuting them. They are not jailing them. They are not even killing them.
Every day you hear people talk to girls, protect yourselves, stay in your lane, but nobody talks to the boy child. Nobody tells the boy child, you need to respect the woman. You need to respect the girls around you. You don't do things or touch girls inappropriately. Nobody tells the boy child that. And that is a fundamental issue. That is one place we need to start, one thing we need to start doing. If we also, as much as we educate the girls to stay on their own, we need to let the boys know that they need to respect the women. Because these rapes are perpetrated by young men and if some in their old ages. If that is achieved, we need to also bring stiff penalties. Penalties like capital punishment.
In April, 18-year-old Jennifer was attacked and raped by a gang of 5 men in Kaduna State. Another 18-year-old student, Barakat, was also raped and murdered in Ibadan. These are just some of the cases that make it to the open.
Now we've taken so many culprits to court, but because of the pressure from communities and the stigma that follows the women, they are forced to withdraw their cases from court. And because men that do rape get away free, they tend to perpetrate the same case. And if nobody is being punished, then the same offense will be occurring over and over again. I will never have a solution. Now, we can sit down here and legislate on this topic. If the state legislators don't adopt what we pass here, this issue will continue to foster.
One of the prayers is that the NOA should embark on sensitization program. What we have in this country right now is that people don't even grasp that rape is a violent act. It has become the new normal in Nigeria. For people to have, for incest is the new normal in Nigeria. Rape is the new normal in Nigeria. People don't understand that it's a violent act.
Mr. Speaker, my amendment is that all men engaged in raping minors should be castrated and jailed.
What's interesting about this is that in the rare event that a woman rapes a minor, what do you do to the woman? Those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. The nays have it.
Already under the penal code and criminal code, rape has been defined as having carnal knowledge without consent and against her will. Yes. That is the definition of rape. And that without her consent and against her will. Yes, in case of a minor, you will have a carnal knowledge of her with her consent, but against her will.
Wait, honorable colleagues. I think we need to get it straight. Rape, there's definition of rape, but there's also something called statutory rape. Statutory rape is when you rape a minor. In other words, consent or no consent. You cannot have carnal knowledge or sexual intercourse with somebody who is underage, whether even with their consent. But the question, the motion by Honorable Faleke is about the punishment that will be attached to, in addition, that will be attached to the rape of a minor, which is already an offense. But what is the punishment? He is now adding a punishment that if you are found guilty of raping a minor, not raping anybody, raping a minor, that the laws should be amended for the punishment to include castration. Who lost their lives.
The House observed a minute of silence in honor of the women who have recently been victims of gender-based violence and resolves that members should dress in black at the next sitting of the House in solidarity with women. Now, while the lawmakers call for stiffer penalties, states must also review their own laws on gender abuse and follow prosecution to a conclusive end. Now, let's move to something else. The National Assembly on Tuesday adjusted some of the parameters of the revised medium-term expenditure framework for 2020 to 2022, which was presented by the President. Also, the Senate approved the President's request to borrow $5.5 billion externally. Now, while the House of Representatives is yet to approve that, it has approved President Buhari's loan request of $22.7 billion, which was initially stood down in March because it did not capture the entire region of the country. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives is calling for the scrapping of the excess crude account, describing it as illegal. One of the many reports considered in the House of Representatives is that of the Committee on Finance on the revised 2020 to 2022 medium-term expenditure framework.
The parameters to look at is the crude oil prices, which has declined sharply in the world markets from 72 per barrel in 2020 and has come as low as $20 and now has just gone up to $38 per barrel. Unfortunately, we had set our benchmark price at $57 per barrel. Now that the price is about $38, we are proposing a $28 per barrel benchmark. Put 2.18 million barrels per day before. It has now been cut down to 1.9, and we are still proposing 1.8 million barrels per day for this MTEC. The excess crude oil account, which has been maintained year in, year out, is scrapped because it is not in line with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Other critical parameters such as exchange rate, inflation growth rate, and GDP growth rate were, however, retained. The House then considered and adopted the report of its Committee on Aid, Loan and Debt Management for the approval of President Muhammadu Buhari's loan request of $22.798 billion, which was initially stood down in March because it did not capture the entire region of the country. The motion is adopted, but not without the Speaker attempting to calm some aggrieved lawmakers from the Southeast who were excluded from the federal government's planned projects.
This is a bitter pill for me to swallow, that we are passing this loan and my zone is not accommodated. We got an assurance that yes, that from the executive, that there will be a proviso in this particular document to state that the subsequent loan that my zone will be carried along.
And we met as leadership with the Minister of Finance for this yesterday. And I told her, this is the clause we're putting into this report. The Port Harcourt-Maiduguri Road must be a part of, or we will not consider any report, any borrowing plan if that is not included. And we got her word. I think a lot has gone into this. It has taken months. And I'm only seeking for the understanding of our colleagues from the Northeast and our colleagues from the Southeast.
Communication to the House requesting...
The loan is part of the federal government's external borrowing plan laid before the House on the 5th of March 2020, before the President's fresh request of $5.5 billion last week.
Let's get down to the business of the day.
Meanwhile, in the Senate, lawmakers also debated the revised MTEF and FSP.
During this COVID-19, most of the transactions have been done through bank. Any transaction that is above 10,000 is charged by 50 naira. Those volumes of transaction are enough if we properly monitor the banks, because most banks are not remitting that money. With new technology now, they don't need to, any person need to go there. It's just for them to set up a system where any transaction in any bank that is above 10,000, anytime you do a transaction, you will see 50 naira stamp duty. That money is not remitted. If they're remitting it, we'll be able to access more money from that.
It is important to note that oil and gas contribute 90% of our export earning. There is no doubt about it. But it's also a fact that oil and gas industry contribute only 10% of our GDP. The meaning is that for us to even maintain this 360 exchange rate, we have to really work so hard and see where we can earn revenue generation other than this oil, because the oil has not been the one. The oil sector contribution is only 10% to the GDP.
The Senate also approved the external borrowing of $5.513 billion requested by the President. The committee, however, recommended that the loan to fund federal government priority projects and support for state governments be stood down because of the absence of sufficient details to guide the committee. Welcome back. On Thursday, plenary was held only by the House of Representatives as the Senate had adjourned on Tuesday for a week. Now let's take a look at some of the issues raised in the Green Chamber.
During Tuesday's plenary, lawmakers in the Green Chamber considered the report of the Committee on the Army, which investigated the killings in Ono Village, Borno State, on February 9, 2020.
Most of the challenge that we have faced is that the Nigerian Army or the armed forces are seriously understaffed. There is no lack of sufficient manpower, and that was the reason for the creation of super camps. That's why you hear when the president say go to Sokoto to address the attack of banditry, when they go there, the insurgent will attack the other places because we don't have enough manpower. And we also realize that there is no police post in our community in spite of that. And we also discovered that the attack was caused by two things. First, the commuters were also late came late at the Maiduguri Damaturu area. And if they didn't come late, this attack wouldn't have taken place.
The lawmakers also resolved that the army should investigate and sanction the soldiers who abandoned their duty post at the time of the attack.
The issue of security.
A member of the House of Representatives, Victor Mela from Gombe State, has threatened to resign after 2 months if nothing is done about the insecurity in the country. He made the threat during a debate on the floor of the House over the state of insecurity in the country, particularly the banditry in the northwest. The motion was raised by Representative Sada Soli, who urged the House to summon the service chiefs, the National Security Advisor, the DG of the Department of State Services, and the Inspector General of Police to brief the lawmakers on the efforts to curb insecurity in the country. His prayer was adopted. This is the first time the 9th House of Representatives is summoning the service chiefs and heads of security agencies to appear before the entire House. They have, however, been summoned to a meeting with the leadership of the House on 2 occasions.
I still want to say the issue is not about money being appropriated for these agencies. Everywhere you go, when you see a fine house, it's either for a captain, for an inspector, or for a superintendent. A lot of people are making money out of this issue. It is time for us as legislators to play our role in making sure that the issue of security in this country improves. Mr. Speaker, distinguished honorable colleagues, finally, I want to say, I will give myself 2 months, Mr. Speaker. If nothing is done tangible to show Nigerians that this House has taken a serious step to cut down the issue of security in this country, I'm going to resign. And I'm serious about it. We cannot come up here and every day we stand and observe silence. The debt is too much. We have to show Nigerians we are for Nigerians.
The House of Representatives has passed a resolution to set up an ad hoc committee to probe the compliance with the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation's pipeline right-of-way in the siting of oil and gas stations. The House is also to investigate the siting of oil and gas stations within and around residential buildings in the country, as well as around electric power and communication lines, railways and highways.
Also note the reoccurring pipeline fire disasters in almost all the states in Nigeria with devastating effects, high casualty rates, and untold hardships to Nigerians, a situation which has been alleged to be mostly linked to the abuse of pipeline right-of-way by individuals, organizations, and corporate bodies, as the safety distance zone right-of-way remains between 600 and 700 feet, which is being flagrantly abused. Further notes the indiscriminate and hazardous siting of oil and gas stations, as well as tank farms within and around residential areas against the approved distance of safety and prevention of health hazards, with the recent Ijegu tank farm and Magodo gas plant explosions, which recorded loss of lives and destruction of properties due to their locations within residential areas. Aware that there are over 400 filling stations located within and around residential buildings in Nigeria, and pollution from petrol stations could contaminate buildings as far as 100 meters, and the minimum safety distance of 50 meters is required. But regrettably, this has constantly been abused, and the situation calls for urgent attention.
Our final report is on the committee meetings held by both chambers of the National Assembly. The Senate Committees on Finance and Local Debt met with the Minister of Finance over loans and the MTIF, while the House of Representatives Committee on Aviation held an investigative hearing on why foreign airlines were being used to evacuate Nigerians from other countries during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Aviation were in attendance.
$5.513 billion is how much the federal government intends to borrow from external sources to fund the amended 2020 budget and key federal government projects. At an interactive meeting with the key managers of the economy, members of the Senate Loans Committee are inquiring about the borrowing terms of the loan and more details of the borrowing plan.
We need this level of borrowing to be able to fully implement a budget that would help to stabilize the economy and help to reduce the chances of our country going into a deep recession.
And I've looked at the detail. When I look at it in terms of what is written here, we are still using huge amount of money we are borrowing to support even the foreign expenditures that are administrative.
At a separate meeting, this time by the Senate Committee on Finance to examine the amended medium-term expenditure framework, committee members are dissatisfied with the revenue projections for the Nigeria Customs Service and Federal Inland Revenue Service. In the amended 2020 budget, the revenue projection for the Customs Service has been reduced from 1.2 trillion naira to 929.2 billion naira, while revenue from stamp duties reduced from 463.9 to 200 billion naira.
How do you ensure that Nigeria is being charged the right cost on each barrel of oil? In Saudi Arabia, it is $4 per barrel.
The fields are not the same. They are totally different. The logistics costs are also very, very different.
The finance minister explains that the federal government did not set out to implement drastic cuts in expenditure in the revised 2020 budget, but is doing this to slow down a decline into another recession. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has begun investigation into the usage of foreign airlines to airlift Nigerians. The Minister of Aviation and Foreign Affairs, as well as Nigerian airline operators, have been invited by the House Committee on Aviation to get to the root of why foreign airlines are being used to evacuate Nigerians from other countries and not Nigerian airlines.
You have a duty to protect the interest of our corporate citizens because they provide employment for our people and also they pay taxes here. The House believes that there are at least 3 Nigerian airlines that have the capacity to carry out the operations: Air Peace, Max Air, and the Asman. The House is concerned that at this time the federal government is thinking of bailout funds to help the airlines overcome the impact of COVID-19. The PTF allowed the little opportunity for the airlines to make money filtered away. I'm sure you people are also aware that Air Peace handled 3 chartered operations during this lockdown period to Israel on March 29th for evacuation of Israeli nationals from Nigeria, Turkey April 4th, and China April 7th for medical evacuation without hitches.
The lawmakers are disappointed that airlines from Britain and Canada have been giving approval to land in Nigeria to evacuate their citizens. But Nigerian airlines have not been granted such approval by those countries because the Nigerian airlines are not familiar to them.
The UAE situation, the ambassador now said that there were 3 flights and that the Nigerians had been buying the tickets of UAE. And of course, a lot of those Nigerians there had return tickets to come back after their trips on Emirates. So they obviously had reasons in some cases. Yes, I got a message to say that what Emirates was charging was too high. Could I, persuade them to bring it down? But this has nothing to do with the Nigerian government. But I put the question to the ambassador, and he said he had no leverage over Emirates. So that is how Emirates then. So when they filled it up, and they were ready to come, we could not say to Nigerians, no, you cannot come back to your own country unless it's on a Nigerian carrier.
We've engaged the Canadians. We've refused the flights, that particular flight, when it was pointed to us as to what was going on between myself and the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. And we had our reasons. If this flight is lawful and legal, if this flight is certified by a Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, if the pilots are so certified, if we don't find anything and it's covered by our bilateral air service agreement, then it is good to go. For that reason, the flight must go.
The airline operators present had a different story from the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
When we gave them this price, the man said, "Are you sure you're going to do it at this price?" I said, "Yes, I'll do it. It is a pride that I'm going to bring Nigerians back." The next thing we heard that they were saying they were not familiar with Air Peace. Has Air Peace ever done international flights before? That is absolutely laughable. That is absolutely laughable. Has Air Peace ever done international flights before? They now demanded from the Nigerian officials over there that they needed to see evidence of flights we've done internationally, both tech stops. So we now sent a list of 46 international flights we conducted, including 4 times into Canada.
The lawmakers insist that countries who have denied Nigerian airlines landing permits must be denied same in Nigeria.
Well, that's a wrap on The Gavel. Send feedback to The Gavel at channelstv.com. I am Terry Ikumi. Bye-bye.